Good afternoon. Again, thank you for your patience and apologies for the delay getting started this afternoon, but we wanted to make sure that we have audio and video recording for the meetings this afternoon for members of the public who may not be able to join us here in person. So starting today, June 15th, 2026, our afternoon committee meetings will begin with Public Works and Natural Resources. That committee is chaired by Councilmember Lillquist, so I will turn it over to him at this time.
Thank you, Council President Stone. Public Works Committee is myself, Councilmembers Lisa Anderson and Jace Cotton. We have two important matters today. We had a little over an hour time. We'll see how much time it takes to cover them so we can maybe catch back up. The first item is an important presentation. It is, an update on the comprehensive sewer plan and emerging solids handling technology. Staff are here to provide an overview of the comprehensive sewer plan update and describe how this work supports long-term wastewater system planning, infrastructure investment, and future solids management evaluation. Staff will also provide an overview of the proposed community engagement approach and discuss how changing technologies, emerging contaminants of concern, and evolving regulations are shaping wastewater planning efforts across the country. The presentation will provide context for how the city is planning for the future while maintaining reliable and compliant wastewater operations today. I see our Public Works Director, Mr. Joel Fontes here, as well as Public Works Deputy Director, Michael Olinger, who would like to start. Okay, Joel?
I'm going to start here in just a moment. I'm just going to make my way back over to the table.
I did. Oh, I did. Did I just
So, good afternoon, City Council, Mayor. I'm Joel Funt. I'm the City Public Works Director, and I'm joined today by Mike Olinger, Deputy Public Works Director. And we're going to provide you with an update on the City Comprehensive Sewer Plan that we are embarking on, as well as an update on emerging solids handling technology and what we've been learning just up to the last couple weeks. So provide kind of the latest and greatest on that. So I wanted to start by saying last fall we were here to describe the path forward for the solids handling at the Post Point to address the notice of violation that we received from the Northwest Clean Air Agency in March of 2024 and how we are addressing that going forward. And now what we're really doing is turning our attention to the future and kind of two things, looking at that, how we plan to maintain, improve, and grow our wastewater treatment system, and also this broader conversation that is taking place in the wastewater industry around planning for technology, changing regulations, and the uncertainty that exists in kind of always really exists in some ways, but wastewater is one of those things right now where it seems like in some ways it's changing day by day, but it's an industry that also changes at a much slower rate at the same time because of its complexity. So today, like I said, I'm going to talk about the comprehensive sewer plan, and I'm going to be talking about why it matters and what it covers. And then I'm going to be turning it over to Mike to talk more about the wastewater solids handling at Post Point and providing an overview of the national landscape and some current examples. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps and answer any questions. So first of all, why does long-term wastewater planning matter? Well, really, this is a substantial investment that the city has made over more than a century in our existing wastewater handling system, from collection and then how we deal with that wastewater down at Post Point. And this system is intended to serve the community today, but also the community for many decades to come. It's a very complex system. It's made up of very new infrastructure, also aging infrastructure. Some of our collection system is in the ground, is over 100 years old, and we have to maintain that and take that very seriously. We have to be thinking about the treatment requirements that we have, the environmental regulations that we need to meet. We have to do this reliably. This system is something that we operate every single day, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, and we need to do that for the population that's here today, but also for the growing population that will be here into the future. And then wrapped around all of this is the financial element of that. We need to, all of those responsibilities we take very seriously, and we are doing that on behalf of our ratepayers who pay for the utility ultimately. This, of course, is this effort, this comprehensive planning effort is something that we feel very strongly about, but also it's state law. That's because the consequences of not doing this kind of work could be significant for public health or environmental protections. So at some point, the state legislature saw the wisdom in requiring all operators of wastewater systems to do this kind of work. So we have not only do we do it the way we want to, but we have very specific requirements about what we need to do in order to get this comprehensive sewer plan approved in the end by our regulators. And then finally, it's timely because you all just passed a new comprehensive plan for the city, the Bellingham plan. And so we have new population forecasts that we can use and apply to this system as we're thinking about this. So this comprehensive sewer plan is really comprehensive, and that's really something that we are doing as a city for the first time. In the past, when we've looked at our sewer system from a long-range planning perspective, we've looked at specific elements of this and of that system. And so this seemed like a really good time to look at that comprehensively, all the way from when that water leaves a business or a residence, all the way through the system to when it leaves the pipe as it goes out into Bellingham Bay. That includes our collection system and making sure that we have the capacity necessary and that we are addressing infiltration and inflow into that system. We're thinking about how we're addressing our aging infrastructure and making sure that we understand the condition of it today, and then how we're going to maintain and preserve that, improve it over time, and then also system performance. We're also looking at what is happening down at Post Point, of course, where we are looking at, we'll be looking at the nutrient reduction requirements that we need to meet through our regulators, our treatment capacity as we change and grow, our solids management strategy, and how we are going to address that in the future. We have a certain way that we do that now, and one of the things that we'll be considering significantly is how we plan to address that into the future. We'll also be looking at how we comply with the complex regulatory environment which we operate under. Because, at any given time, we are regulated not only by the Department of Health, but also Department of Ecology. We have the Northwest Clean Air Agency, which we have to make sure we're meeting all of our requirements with, as well as other regulators that we keep an eye on us. And then all of this we think about from the perspective of infrastructure and financial planning. We will have a well thought out and considered list of improvements that we need to make from a capital investment perspective. And then we will be thinking about the financial planning for that and how we make sure we can fund that over time and do that in a financially sustainable way. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what the plan is and what it is not. This planning effort is not a single decision point, but it is a long-range guiding framework that really we think about how we're going to, through this plan, implement over time this complex system. It's a tool to evaluate options, risks, and trade-offs. It was also a foundation for responsible long-term decision-making, and this process will be community-informed, but technically led by our well-trained expert staff, as well as scientists, engineers, regulators, in the form of consultants and otherwise, to make sure that we're doing this in a way that is going to get us where we need to go and do it in a way that is consistent with those community values. But what the system is not, it is not going to be a single decision on a specific technology. We are not going to be making final facility design or selections as part of this plan. And it's not a substitute for future engineering, permitting, or environmental review. That is all done at the time as these projects come along and we learn a lot, learn more. And unfortunately, as with any plan, it cannot predict the future, although that would make things much more convenient. But it's really, we are working in a wastewater industry that is changing significantly. Scientific understanding, regulations, technologies, treatment approaches are all changing, before our eyes, and we want to make sure that we are doing that in a thoughtful way. And really, we feel that is why this long-range guiding framework is so important, is even as those other things change, we can always look back to this comprehensive plan and make sure we are doing this effort and consistent with our long-term plans and our community's values. So, like I mentioned, there is no single factor that drives drives decisions. It is really a balancing of a number of different factors. So when we're developing this plan, some of the things that we will be taking into account is the technical reliability of the system and solutions. We'll be looking at proven performance, making sure we can operate things dependably and that they operate in the long term. We'll be, like I've mentioned a little bit before, is leaning on community priorities through public engagement, developing shared values, and creating informed understanding of the situation in the community. We'll also be looking at operational feasibility. That is important from making sure that we have the staff capacity to operate these various complex systems, and we can do that in an integrated way, and we can continue to maintain it in the future. And of course, we do all of this mindful of the financial impacts of the decisions we make, both in the near term and long term, thinking about environmental performance and the future of PFAS reduction, addressing nutrient removal, and other emerging environmental outcomes, which we seem to learn about every day. And then, like I've mentioned before, is we're always doing this in a way where we need to meet our regulatory requirements from our regulators out there. And so with that, I am going to pass it over to Mike to talk some about what's going on in the industry with wastewater solids handling.
Thank you, Joel. Good afternoon, Council. Mike Ollinger, Deputy Director of Public Works. While the comprehensive sewer plan evaluates the entire wastewater system, one area receiving particularly significant national attention right now is solids management. Utilities across the country are trying to navigate changing PFAS science, evolving regulations, disposal challenges, aging infrastructure, and emerging technologies all at the same time. Because these issues are changing rapidly, staff continue closely tracking how other utilities are approaching these challenges and what lessons are emerging nationally. And one thing that this is leading to is a little bit of long-term uncertainty within the industry. Part of our responsibility is staying engaged in these conversations nationally. Staff continue attending conferences, visiting facilities, talking with utilities and regulators, and tracking how projects are performing in real-world conditions. These conversations and site visits help us understand not just where technologies are showing promise, but also where operational, regulatory, and implementation challenges are still emerging. Some of the things that we're learning and key learning points is that site characteristics play a big role in what technology is used, and these transitions are taking longer than what most in the industry would like to see. The Earth Care facility in Pennsylvania is one example of where the industry is trying to go. There's real interest nationally in technologies like gasification because of their potential to reduce solids volumes and address PFAS concerns. At the same time, facilities like this illustrate how many operational and regulatory questions are still being worked through, including air quality controls, odor management, feed consistency, material handling, and permitting pathways. In many cases, these projects are still operating in environments that are very difficult from large municipal wastewater systems like ours. The Earth Care facility, many of us staff visited this facility last month. The gasification process is showing a lot of promise. We were really encouraged by what we've seen at the site. At the same time, there were some things that would bring us challenges. As we visited the site, when we left the site, we were driving back to Philadelphia, and all of us in the car kept trying to figure out what was in the car with us, what animal we brought with us, and come to find out it was me. My cotton clothing that I was wearing while I visited this facility had soaked up the smell, and the smell did not come out. And so we ended up stopping so that I could buy new clothes so that the rest of us could still breathe and that I wouldn't draw attention in the airport. At the same time, you can see in the picture here some of their air controls. We went to walk underneath of those air controls, and we were instructed by staff at the facility to stop, because if any of that stuff dripped on us, they said it would take a month for it to come out of our skin or our clothing. Those are just some of the things that they're working through. The system is showing extensive promise. The gasifier itself seems to be working very well. The one gasifier unit that they are using to burn municipal solids, but at the same time, they are not processing undigested solids yet. Everything that they are processing is digested. They're operating in the middle of farm country. They do have a few surrounding neighbors, but nothing that would be in the context of within a city. But they're showing promise, and they're continuing to develop. They have one plant that is processing biosolids right now. They're looking to stand up another facility to process biosolids. That would be serial number 2. But showing promise, and we will continue to engage with them and look at the work that they're doing. Edmonds is one of the few municipal wastewater utilities in the country actively attempting to transition from traditional incineration to full-scale gasification technology. Because there are still relatively few municipal scale examples nationally, utilities and regulators are continuing to learn in real time about how these systems perform operationally and regulatorily. One thing that stood out to staff is the timeline and complexity involved in moving a project like this forward. Edmonds has been working through the transition process for many years. The system was originally expected to come online in 2022 and is still continuing through operational and implementation challenges. In our conversations with Edmonds and with Jacobs Engineering, who is their consultant, they were able to start this gasifier for about a week last month. It did operate during that time, and it showed a lot of promise. It was able to process the solids efficiently. What they're finding is that they're having a hard time getting the consistency of the solids to be at a level that allows the gasifier to operate continually. So at the end of that week, they had to shut the gasifier down so that they could do some more work on the system, and they're hoping to make another go at starting the system up again in August. The project also illustrates how the science and regulatory understanding around PFAS are still evolving. Some early research results associated with the facility are promising and suggest significant PFAS reduction through the process. At the same time, questions remain nationally around transformation, byproducts, emissions pathways, testing methods, and long-term regulatory implications. And there was a recent article published based on the results at Edmonds, and those results are showing that PFAS destruction is probably in the 90 to 95% range post-RTO. So regenerative thermal oxidization, which is a higher temperature process that happens at the end of it. With the RTO, they're thinking that they're achieving about 95% PFAS destruction. And the science is still evolving to figure out where the other 5% is going or what's happening with it. So we're continuing to monitor that. We're engaging closely with Edmonds. Likewise, we're engaging with Linwood on their process. So both of those facilities are trucking their solids. Some of the concerns that are coming out of both of those entities with their trucking is that every truck that leaves their site leaves a trail. They are continually cleaning up solids that are dripping out of trucks and being left on the streets and things like that. They said that that's been a struggle for them all along. They're working on better containment within the containers that they're trucking out, but it doesn't stop them from having to run street sweepers to try to collect the solids that are dripping and deal with the complaints that are coming from residents as these trails occur from time to time. What we're hearing constantly from utilities across the country is that there's real interest in where these technologies may be heading, but most agencies are still relying on proven systems while they watch the technology, regulations, and operational lessons continue to mature. The city's responsibility is to steward critical public infrastructure in a way that protects public health, maintains reliable service, and responsibly manages long-term risks during a period of significant industry uncertainty and change. The current path remains the most responsible near-term approach while long-term solutions continue evolving. While we continue evaluating future alternatives and monitoring emerging technologies, we also have an obligation to maintain compliant, reliable wastewater operations today. The near-term upgrades provide operational stability and regulatory compliance while allowing time for technologies, regulation, and industry practices to continue evolving. For the comprehensive sewer plan, initial technical analysis and system evaluation work is already underway, with the broader planning effort expected to continue through 2028. Over the next couple of years, we'll continue evaluating technologies, tracking regulations, engaging with the community and our partner agencies across the country, and bringing information back to council as the work progresses. And with that, we're happy to take any questions that the council might have.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Joel. Committee members. Lisa?
I knew the date, but I can't recall, and I'm not sure if you'll remember, but Edmonds, when they decided to move over to the gasification, do you know when that work started as far as like when they might have started design and then build? Because I know they were supposed to be online 2022. There's just some in our community who seem to think we might have a faster switch over to something other than incineration. And knowing how long our previous plan that some of us kind of stopped because of the PFAS concern, I know that was in the works for over 10 years. I'm just kind of wondering, should we pick a new technology and decide we're all in something like gasification if it didn't have the issues that it currently is still being addressed? How long would it take to bring something that online?
I can't speak to when Edmonds started the process. Our understanding is that Edmonds started their project in 2018. They did have some delays because of COVID, but the project was supposed to be, with the COVID delays, was supposed to be operational in 2022. When they started their actual planning and design and development, I don't know the answer to that. I flippantly, and Councilmember Lilliquist has heard me say this, that it's 10 years and $10 million. Within the wastewater industry, that's normal for a project. Now, that could be a gross overestimate, but we throw that number around a lot, that it takes 10 years to come up with a full design, permit it, go to bid, construct it, make it operational. You're in that 7 to 10 year time range.
More discussion? I have a question. With regard to Earth Care, which is to say is promising technology, up and running and under slightly different circumstances, you said that right now they are accepting some outside municipal waste in one of their gasification chains, but you said they're processing digested municipal waste, and you made a point out of that as opposed to undigested. What's the difference, and what do you have to do to get it to that other state? What kind of processing needs to still occur on site before it is shipped to them?
So they're processing digested waste. We do not digest at Post Point. So digested waste means that it's already been stabilized, and most of the odor has been eliminated already. So that is where the significant difference is. So it's already a stable product. Ours is not as stable as what digested waste would be, as well as you're within those agencies who are bringing waste to them. So if Earth Care needs to shut down for a week and work on their gasifier, they just let their providers know, hey, you can't bring us any waste for a week. We would not have that option. We need to truck out of our facility every day.
So right now, where the liquid stream goes this way, the solid stream goes this way, there is some activated sludge process occurs early on before the solids get to the incinerators. When it gets to the incinerators, it's not digested, but it is treated and transformed in some sense.
It's just dewatered.
It's just dewatered.
Yep.
Waste.
Taking it from a 4, 5, 6% solids to a 20 to 25% solids.
Okay, that helps answer that question. Further discussion? I have another question then. You talk about Edmonds and their estimates on PFAS destruction, 90 to 95, which is, I was surprised that it's that low because there are high temperature incinerators that have been measured to achieve that. You also said that it included RTO. I can't remember what RTO stands for. We don't need to know, but in our current emissions control process, we will have RTO as I think first of 3 different emission control technologies. What is the significance of RTO with regard to our emissions control and theirs?
So RTO is just processing the exhaust at a higher temperature. So you're running it through another, my technical experts are here, but you're running it through another afterburner.
Okay, so it might come off at, I'm going to make it up, 1,100 or 1,000 degrees. You might jack that up to 1,300 or 1,400.
No, probably looking at closer to 18 to 2,000.
1,800, okay, so that would explain that might explain more destruction to PFAS.
Yeah, and I can give some context. I think what we're finding is that the testing capabilities of our testers is getting better. And so what we thought was being fully destroyed, we're finding that no, it actually wasn't being destroyed. And Steve Day does a better job talking about this, but when we talk about the weight, there's some missing weight in the emissions.
Well, that's concerning, but if it's a similar problem with the emissions from gasification, then we're going to need to solve it regardless of what solids handling technology. Any further discussion? Other council members? I see Dan and then also Skip. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just a follow-up question on the Edmonds process. I think you said the solids aren't consistent with gasification needs. I'm just trying to understand that process a little bit better.
Yeah, so in gasification, gasification has been around for decades, mostly in the animal industry because the waste that comes out of animals is very consistent. The waste that comes out of all of us is not that consistent. So whether you are running it through a drying process or some other type of process, you're digesting it and then drying it, using other technologies to provide a consistent feedstock. So what's really important is having storage on the front side and the back side of the gasifier. And Edmonds' site is so constricted that they don't have a lot of site for storage prior to gasifying. And so I think more so than the actual gasifier working, Their issues are more related to the logistics of feeding the gasifier and taking waste away from the gasifier.
And one other element of the gasifier that's important is the optimally you would run it consistently and you're not turning it off and firing it back up, is because that has a significant impact on the life of and the performance of the equipment for that process.
As well as energy consumption.
Yeah, my understanding gasification generates a lot of its own operational energy, but you have startup.
Yep.
And Skip, you had a question as well, or comment?
Just more of a comment than a question. My first year up here, this was the big issue, and we are still dealing with it, but I really appreciated your presentation and was wondering, after we're all done here today, if you could send me a copy of the slideshow so I can get it sunk into my...
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any further questions or discussion? I'm going to go with Lisa and then to Hannah.
Just thinking timeline, what happens next. This started my first year in council, so this is my 7th year of talking about Post Point and direction. We were really close to basically the 11th hour pulling the trigger for one process and starting the build on that, and that pulled back. The gasification seems to be great new technology. We were talking about places in Australia that were being innovative, and when we were like, okay, if we're pausing, what's next? And it seems like gasification seems to be a direction, but there were other technologies we talked about 5 years ago. So I'm kind of hesitant because the things, as you said, are rapidly changing. Are there other emerging technologies you guys have, because I've been trying to research and it's just a grab bag out there, other things that other municipalities internationally or local that are looking promising, or do you think gasification really is the direction most municipalities are going? A predecessor at one point had always said they don't want to be the first in on anything. They like to see closer to 6 to a dozen going forward so that the bugs are worked out. Kind of feel like we probably don't have that type of timeline available to us because of how long it takes to bring in technology moving forward. I'd hate for us to be going one direction and 6 years from now another council is looking at another pause or a different direction. So any insight on whether gasification seems to be going the national trend, or there's some promising things out there that we're also investigating?
I think that gasification is showing the most likely success today. Pyrolysis is still an option, and they're trying to scale pyrolysis up to an industrial level. Supercritical water oxidization is still showing promise, but they have yet to put it on a full scale. Mostly they can process in the 1 to 2 million gallon a day sort of range, but have not been able to process it up to the 10, 20, 30, 70 million gallons per day. I think today gasification is probably the most promising technology, I would say probably in the next 5 to 10 years. But that could change tomorrow.
And I would like to add, Councilmember Anderson, from your perspective of thinking about the future, and those, these processes are, long, and as you well know, decisions are made and a kind of stepwise as it gets further along. And one thing that we would really like to do with this comprehensive sewer plan is really lay the groundwork so that we can not only start the process, but whatever we do, we see through to the end, and that future council feels comfortable kind of seeing that through and feeling comfortable that all the folks that came before them have made a thoughtful and well-considered decision. And, I think to the point of like solids handling, this is not a question of, if we change, it's a matter of when, but we want to do that in a thoughtful way that is balances all of the different things that we're trying to take into account here. Not only, some very real, the science continues to change as we continue to understand more about what's going on in, in the world of the chemicals of concern. But we also are trying to be mindful of, if we get this, wrong, the utility ratepayers are the folks that will end up paying.
And I think I just want to finish answering the rest of your question. So when we look around the rest of the country and the world, that these technologies are continuing. So Logan Home, Australia, they are working to add a new gasification plant in Victoria. We're continuing to engage with them. They're working through the permitting process, which is taking them significantly more time than that they had expected. But we're continuing to engage with them, and we're going to go visit them as soon as they get something going in Victoria as well.
Follow up, go ahead.
One thing for people who perhaps haven't paid as much attention, I just do want to say, past staff, past council, I think they did their due diligence. They did have a good process getting there, but it was emerging information like PFAS that put the brakes on it. And that was something that wasn't really known when, the first 9 steps were done. It was something that really kind of showed itself as time progressed. So just a statement, I think having a plan is a really good idea, especially if it's, value stated, economically feasible, environmental, that there's a lot of things that we're using as a lens making our decision, because then I think having justification for an off-ramp if something comes up that is just a complete unknown now, because it was a struggle for us to do the off-ramp, because, I was told very smart people before you had made these decisions, and it's like, well, they didn't have all of the information. So I just worry not so much that we're not going to do the right work. We'll do the right work in our current frame, but further down the line, there can be something that was a complete unknown that then can change pathways. And I want to make sure that the plan addresses that kind of ideology, that new emerging information is based on these kind of criteria is enough evidence to say, even though we've spent a lot of time and money, it's appropriate to do an off-ramp, given it's against these other values at this point.
Anna, you got a question or comment?
Yeah, thank you. So I recognize the technical analysis and that system evaluation, right? I'm going to leave that to the experts in the industry and look forward to hearing more as the development continues. You mentioned that this work is expected to continue through 2028, but there's a highlight about community engagement, and I know in the background for the agenda item, highlighting that the process will include community engagement opportunities to ensure that the plan going forward is reflective of our community values. I'm just wondering, at this point in the process, are you able to speak at all to what that community engagement would look like and the time or scope for that coming forward? And I don't know if that's you or other members of the team, but.
We are working on a community engagement plan with our consulting team, and that will include working with the community to develop those values, and with a particular focus around the solids handling, as well as other parts. We've heard from interest groups in the community that the solids handling is an important discussion they want to be part of, and so we want to make sure we're honoring that discussion. As for details, those are still kind of being put together, but that's the general idea is that it we would have a lot of opportunities to make sure that the community feels comfortable and is informed about the work we do and how we do it, and then particularly it'll be focused around those values and how those values can then be used to inform the technical decision making on all of the different elements. So, yeah.
Any further discussion on this? Okay, Okay, this is for information discussion only. Thank you very much, staff. Go on to the next item. So a little note, my written packet says sewer plan first, tip second. I think online it might have had them reversed. So I'm sorry for any confusion to people, staff, and members of the public. I'm going in the order of my written packet. So the next item has to do with our transportation improvement program. We have before us a resolution adopting the 2027 to 2032 Transportation Improvement Program. This 6-year TIP, as we call it, is a transportation planning and funding document. It is adopted annually to plan and program funding towards city capital projects that improve and maintain Bellingham's multimodal transportation network. So it sits right between actually designing a process and actually budgeting it, and then getting to that point where you design and budget. The City Council did indeed hold a public hearing on the TIP on our June 1st meeting. The City Council is required to submit the TIP update by July 1st. We've held it over to this committee for further discussion or questions if there are any. Tim Holman is here, one of our Public Works, our transportation lead for Public Works. You or Joel? Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Lillquist, members of the committee, and other council members present. Tim Holman, Public Works Assistant Director over Transportation. And yeah, I'm here today to introduce or reintroduce to you a resolution for approval of the 2027 to 2032 Transportation Improvement Program. Like you said, we had a public hearing at the council member meeting on June 1st, and by state law, we're required to approve and submit to WashDOT a TIP by July 1st. The only change from the TIP that was in the packet at the public hearing and between the one that is in your packet today is moving the bike rack program. I believe it was number 27. We moved it up to be program number 6. So it's number 6 on the current list in the programs section. We thought that just fit the format a little better. One of the comments at the public hearing was a desire for the city to be a little more proactive about the bike rack program. And that's kind of one of the intents of including this as a standard program in the TIP. Solidifying that funding source will allow the staff to be a little more proactive about looking for opportunities where we can install bike racks in maybe outside of downtown and Fairhaven, where we've kind of done it now, into other urban villages as well as other parts of the city. It's also going to allow for a little more proactive maintenance of the existing bike racks that are out there. So that was a great comment. Staff recommends approval of the TIP so that we can send it off to WashDOT by the end of the month. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim. Committee members? Lisa?
Trying to think how to frame this. Not specifically to the TIP, and I don't know if staff would be able to speak to this, but there is a group who was looking, I think it's through Walk and Roll, but Safe Street Bellingham, and they have a proposal of moving some projects sooner. I think it's a pretty ambitious goal to have some of the work done this summer, but it has to do with bike lanes and crosswalks and striping. And some of that is in the TIP, but it's not necessarily, I think it's interspersed through multiple projects, and I believe they've met with staff, they've met with some council members, and I think they may have met with the mayor's team. And I'm just wondering if their goal of moving some of the street work, if that would be, not to say, are you going to support it, but is there any known conflict with the timeline for the TIP for things to be moved around in the future? Because I know the TIP is kind of our long-range plan for 6 years. If there's something in there that might be for year 4 and council or the mayor's team or other opportunities came forward and it wanted to be moved up to year 2, is there the flexibility to be able to accomplish that? I'm assuming I know the answer, but I just wanted it to be stated.
So, yeah, many of these projects are reliant on funding, and a lot of, I don't know if there's more than maybe 1 or 2 projects that are in here that do not leverage outside grant funding, which makes it between those couple things. And then there's the element of a project that is in design. If we pause that, that has real ramifications. So in a lot of ways, you know, I like to think of when we're talking about the TIP, what we're really talking about, like the more, you know, the part that is more flexible is really those outer 1 or 2 years, because the first, you know, couple years are pretty well baked, and we're just implementing at that point through design and with grants that we have already signed agreements on and those kinds of things. So the one place where we do have some flexibility and feedback, like what we've received from Walk and Roll, definitely comes into account, is through the non-motorized program, which is a bit more of a flexible program that we put together. That will be coming back to council for bid award here in the next month or 2. And that's really more, you know, we'll be seeing a bunch of rapid flashing beacons that are part of that, a bunch of flashing crosswalks, some additional bike lane, those types of things. And that feedback from like Walk and Roll in those cases will, and definitely, you know, we take that into consideration as we're building that next program.
And real quick, I just wanted to jump in to remind council that the TIP is an annual process. Even though we call it the 6-year TIP, we handle it every year. So again, next spring we'll be working on the 28 through 33 TIP, hard to believe. But you know, that is a time for some of those discussions to happen.
So my assumption was internal funding, there's a lot more flexibility unless it's earmarked for some of those that are pairing the external funding, which would put that at risk. So in-house, we might have a little more flexibility, but things requiring the internal funding to go with the external, there's less flexibility and moving those things around. So thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I brought theirs up. But
Go ahead, Lisa.
I was, we didn't receive significant feedback, opposed or necessarily pro, on the TIP, and I appreciated the opportunity to move this forward so the public would have more time to make comments should they, versus just a hearing and making a decision. But seeing that there was nothing really glaring that the public has pointed out, and I think you guys did a really good job presenting the information, I will move that we vote to approve the TIP.
We have a motion before us to vote to approve the resolution adopting the 2027-2032 6-year Transportation Improvement Program. I'm going to ask for any further discussion on the motion or non-committee members. I would like to make a few observations and kind of hopeful statements. I see 5 nice significant projects that have a category called unknown, which might seem like, why are you doing it if it's unknown? Those are actually the opportunity projects. Those are the projects that right now are 2030 or 31 that could be 29 or 28 if there's grant funding. That's one of the greatest values of having this TIP. Those unknowns aren't a mistake, they're opportunities. So I wanted to notice that. And then I wanted to make a kind of comment or plea. There's a rather large project out there in the future, not unfunded, using our own transportation funds, but in the out years, presumably because we don't have the money for it right now. We've used it up. That's the James Street multimodal improvements between Iowa Street and Sunset. I'm really thinking about that because that is going to be nearly a Holly Street type of challenge. That is a major arterial for automobiles, and yet we're hoping to not only resurface it, but to make it maybe a place that has better multimodal possibilities. Maybe a bike lane or not. Certainly the sidewalks could stand with improving. They're kind of up and down. They're old. They need to be redone. That's in the out years. That is a major project. I'm looking forward to that. It would be nice if it could move forward, because I do think that will be a major transformative project in the out years. So I wanted to make that observation, and I do think it's not going to be an easy one, design-wise. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question for the committee to recommend approving the resolution. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'll bring that forth unanimous recommendation to the whole committee, the whole council tonight. Thank you very much. That's the last item on the Public Works and Natural Resources Committee. The committee is now adjourned, and I return meeting back over to Council President Stone.
Thank you very much. So we will take a brief break. The next committee will start at 2:20, and that will be Community and Economic Development. So see you back in a few minutes. Thanks. Welcome back to the Bellingham City Council committee meetings. We're going to get started this afternoon now with Community and Economic Development. That committee is chaired by Councilmember Cotton, so I'll turn it over to him at this time.
Good afternoon. We have one agenda item today. This is a presentation on the Bellingham Home Share Program. As a reminder, the city has implemented a new home sharing program that connects homeowners who have an extra bedroom, or 2, 3, with good fit renters. The program, in partnership with Nesterly, increases our community's existing housing supply by turning underutilized bedrooms into successful living arrangements. It addresses Bellingham's housing needs by offering a more supportive rental option that builds social connections and increases financial independence for program participants. I will first recognize Tara Sundin, Community and Economic Development Manager for the city.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us here today. As you know, the city is addressing this housing crisis in a number of ways. And in the Community Development Division, we're a little more focused on supporting our lower income community members. Some of those more conventional ways that we approach this matter is we lend monies to the nonprofit housing developers and help construct and bring on more units. We invest in the first-time homebuyer program, we invest in rental assistance programs, et cetera. But a few years ago, we were kind of trying to unlock some, like, what else can we do? And this program came up, this idea came up, and we think of this as one of the more creative ways to approach this problem. We estimate that somewhere between 4,000 and 10,000 empty bedrooms exist in our community. And just on the conservative side of 4,000, that would take us a lot of time to construct that many housing units, and would cost a lot of money to construct that many housing units. So we thought, let's give this a shot. We reached out to partners like Aging Well Whatcom and others to see if they had the bandwidth to launch a program like this. And not new to you, but our community just lacked the capacity at the time to take on yet another program, and one that was untested in our area, one that needed a 4 or 5 year commitment to keep it going, to see if we could launch a program like this. So we undertook this project, and we did that knowing we had funds to keep it going for 5 years, and knowing that we could find somebody like Nesterly to partner with, a business that already had the experience to undertake a program like this. So here we are, sort of the first year, and I want to acknowledge the team that has been doing the heavy lifting. You're going to see Taylor Webb today. She's going to present here in a minute. But I also wanted to acknowledge her kind of co-project manager, Kathleen Morton, who works in community development as well. She's here today. And then also Ryan Keewin, who's our communication manager. This is a program that not only needs good communication, but also marketing. And she has just done a fantastic job. So I want to thank the team for the work they've done, and Thank you, Taylor. Taylor's going to take it from here.
Thank you, Tara. And thank you, council members. I'm excited to be here today to talk a little bit more about the Bellingham Homeshare Program. So Tara covered this a little bit already, but I just wanted to acknowledge a lot of this work started a couple years ago when Mayor Lund released the Housing Executive Order, and really was a call to action for staff to find creative ways that we can approach this housing issue that we're facing today. And just want to highlight again the stark number we have here of approximately 4,000 to 10,000 underutilized bedrooms in Bellingham. That's quite a lot that we could tap into. So just to back up slightly, I want to talk a little bit about what home sharing is. Home sharing is when a homeowner has empty bedrooms and they rent those out to people in the community. Specifically for Bellingham, we're really focusing on that homeowner piece. And that really ties into a lot of what home sharing can benefit the community. The first being affordability. There's kind of two parts, affordability for the homeowner and affordability for the renter. So on the homeowner side, having some additional supplemental income every month can really make the difference for folks to be able to age in place and stay in this community, stay in the home that they love. And for renters, home sharing is often a more affordable option. By affordable, I mean typically less than market rate because you are sharing some of those amenities with the homeowner. It also is an efficient use of our resources. As Tara mentioned, it takes a long time to build new housing. There's all these empty bedrooms that are available right now that we can tap into and really use efficiently. And the last piece, I don't want this to be taken lightly, is the companionship that can really come out of these matches. Something that we saw a lot of, especially in COVID, was loneliness. People really seeking out this sense of companionship, and for a lot of older adults, especially when they're living in their homes, isolated, they really crave that interaction and that connectedness that you can get by inviting someone into your home and having a roommate again. So we established the Bellingham Homeshare Program really with this goal of 5 years as a pilot. And other jurisdictions who have done home sharing programs throughout the U.S. have done a similar model, knowing that you're really not going to see results in 1 or 2 years. It takes a long time to build trust in a new platform, a new idea in the community. So we're really trying to start out modestly here with the number of matches that we think that we can get. By a match, that means a homeowner with an empty bedroom and a renter, and really trying to create quality matches. So for us at the city, our goal really is to, just in year 1, which will be coming up in fall, to have 10 successful home share matches. We currently have 4 matches right now, so we're excited about that, and I'll go into detail about that a little bit later. But really, this partnership isn't possible without our partner Nesterly. So through the city's public procurement process, we requested proposals for a vendor who could operate a site for us. Nesterly was the person who won in that process, and that's because they really have a strong history of doing this type of work across the U.S. Their first city that they launched in was Boston 8 years ago, and Boston started off with a similar pilot program as we're deploying right now. For the city of Boston, it's been wildly successful, and I'm sure you can imagine there's some similarities between us and Boston. They have a strong university presence, so they have often a lot of renters, but they also have a lot of people who love the city. It's rich in culture, and people want to stay there. You know, maybe they were there earlier in their lives, and they don't want to move away. They want to be engrossed in all of that culture still, but it's hard to do that and to stay in place when maybe they don't have the same income that they used to. So Boston's been wildly successful. They're still a user of the Nesterly platform. You could go on their website and see they have dozens and dozens of listings. We hope to be there 8 years in for the city of Bellingham as well. So I want to talk a little bit more about Nesterly itself and really what this program offers. On its face, it really looks like maybe Airbnb, right? You have a map and you have listings that you can browse. But I want to stress that it's so much more than that. It's not just a listing platform. Really what Nesterly does is offer full services to any user of the site. And really that focuses on creating quality matches. So oftentimes people will list their rooms available on Facebook Marketplace. And you kind of do your own, maybe you interview people and you hope it's going to go well and you've drafted up your own agreement, but you don't really know what that means. Really, Nesterly is here to take all of the hassle out of the way for homeowners who might want to do this process. And again, they're really focused on those quality matches, and they do that through offering specialized support with their service providers who are trained social workers. So it's more than just customer service. They really have experience in making sure that homeowners and renters are both asking each other the right questions to make sure that it's a smart match for both parties. And again, with the custom agreements, it's a little bit different than a normal lease because you're inviting someone into your own home. So really, Nesterly is there to help you create and draft custom language that really matches what your specific situation is. And both parties, both the host and the renter, are required to go through background checks. So you can make sure that both parties feel safe before entering into the agreement. And I do want to point out that it is free to join. Anyone at any time can go on the site and browse the listings for free without creating an account. But you can join for free as well. There is a low fee that Nesterly does assess based on when the first match is made. So I want to talk a little bit, I'll round out here by sharing our first home share match. And to start, I wanted to give you all a sense of what it looks like if you haven't visited nesterly.com. When you're browsing the listings, this is what it will look like. So you'll have some photos, as well as some information about what the listing itself offers. You can see when it's available for move-in. And I wanted to point out a special feature that Nesterly offers, which is an option for a task exchange. Any host could choose to add this if they wanted to, which basically is an exchange for some help around the house. In this example, some house cleaning and yard work. They're willing to take an additional amount of money off of the monthly rent. So for this particular case, the rent started at $600, and now with the optional task exchange, it's $450 a month, which does include utilities. And I'm sure you all maybe are aware this is much lower than anything else that's offered in our community right now. So we're really excited to be able to offer options at this price to our community members looking for homes. And I wanted to point out this Civic Leader badge here. We worked with Nesterly to set a monthly rent amount that we felt was at an affordable rate. That amount is $600 a month. So for any host who lists their vacant bedroom for $600 a month or lower, we place the Civic Leader badge on the profile, and that really indicates, both from Nesterly's standpoint and our standpoint, that we're prioritizing listings that are low cost for our community members. And so this is a really sweet photo that we received of our first match, Joyce and Franceline. Joyce was a 92-year-old who was living alone, and she really knew that she could benefit from having some supplemental income and also some help around the house. But she felt really overwhelmed by the process of having to find someone to rent her space by herself. So Nesterly ended up being a really great match for her. And they were really hands-on in this process. Joyce, as a 92-year-old woman, wasn't very used to using online platforms such as this. And so they really walked her through every step of the way, through a lot of one-on-one help. They helped her create her profile. They also helped her review all of the interested renters that were presented to her, and they would even remind her if they saw that there were some requests that maybe hadn't been answered. They would call up Joyce and say, hey, just wanted to see if you had a moment to check some of these requests, and do you have any questions? Can we help you through this process? And they had lots of interest, and after a while she was able to find Franceline, who is a 60-year-old woman, local artist in our community, and they just really hit it off with each other. So they were matched back in March, and we really do hope that it'll be successful for them. It's a 6-month lease term, and hopefully they will choose to renew after that. So we hope that there's a lot more success coming, similar matches to this success story, but we know that that work isn't possible without your help, so we're really hopeful that we can spread the word about this platform and the benefits that it can achieve. And with that, I'll pass it over to Mayor Lund to close us out. Thank you all.
I just wanted to share, I think everyone that's on the dais knows that to create 5,000 bedrooms is thousands of units of housing, and exactly how much work that takes, how much cost that takes, how much time that takes. So this is it's a program that is rich with promise. And I think it's a program that has a heart, like hearing the story of Joyce and Franceline. Like, this is a program that aligns with our community's values. And so I wanted to have an invitation to all of you to help be program ambassadors, to help me and staff get the word out for our housing advocates in the community, an invitation to them to help get the word out. Not only are those rents so far below market rates right now, this is a program that has elements of mutual aid that I think are really important and align with our community as well. So there's a lot of goodness here, and I think we can far exceed our goals for matches if we can especially drive people to open up their homes, to open up their bedrooms. We know firsthand that the need is out there. People are seeking safe, reliable housing in spaces like this. We know the need. So if we can encourage people to take a risk and put their available rooms on Nesterly, Bellingham will be better for it. So thanks to everyone that's worked so hard on this program.
Sorry, I forgot I was cheering. Questions from committee, Councilmember Huffman.
This looks like a wonderful program, and I've been looking at the website to see what's available. The website looks a lot like some of the other apartment listing sites that I've seen. So I think I have just the look of it, just the way the site's structured. I think I have 2 questions. One was a marketing question. I think the success of this will rest on how we spread the word. Of course, sometimes word of mouth is one of the best ways to spread the word. But what are we doing as a city? What plans do we have to promote this, different ways to share the information, get the word out? I think that sharing real stories in the community is a great way to help spread the word, because it's really easy to relate either to being the renter or the homeowner. But marketing, how is that? What kind of plans do we have there, and how do we, I guess, reduce the barriers to make this feel like it's just another way to look for a room like already exists in our community?
Thank you, Councilmember Huffman. To answer your first question about marketing, that's been our primary focus since launch, and actually will be continuing to be our primary focus for the next probably the 2 first years of the program, just knowing that building awareness is the first step that we need to tackle. And really, by building awareness, we mean primarily marketing to homeowners. We know that the renters are here and that they're looking all the time for housing, but the nature also for renters is that they're looking when they need housing and then they're not once they've found it, right? So we need to have options for them to look at, and we can only do that by having homeowners list their rooms for rent on the site. So primarily our efforts for marketing and advertising have been geared towards homeowners in our community, but we've also been just trying to raise general awareness in the community. We've been invited to speak at a variety of different events. We've tried to create sound partnerships in our community with Western, Bellingham Technical College, Whatcom Community College, and a lot of other partners. And so a lot of it is really building the trust and getting people familiar with the site. And then your second question about reducing some of those barriers, that's certainly been part of this initial discovery phase, is trying to understand what barriers are people experiencing, what's stopping people from wanting to be a part of this site. And a lot of that is, I think, they're just unsure about it. They haven't heard that someone's done it, right? So to your point about sharing stories, we certainly hope to get to that point. We don't want to prematurely share when we don't know the outcome of some of these matches yet. We're in our early years. We did get permission from Joyce and Francine to share their story, so we were happy to do that today, and we hope that that'll be everyone's experience.
Councilmember Hamel.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I don't serve on the committee, but this is an issue that's near and dear to me. This is a significant departure from when I started years and years ago. We had what was called the Rule of Three, if any of you would recall that, where legally no more than 3 unrelated people could live together, which if any person went to any higher education institution in this community, you may or may not have lived in shared housing, and you may or may not have violated that rule. I did. I guess I think that the spirit of this is great. I do share, I have some concerns, however, and I want to share those with you. The rate of scaling to me is concerning. So 260 matches within 5 years is just, I mean, I totally respect the fact that this is like a startup period, and eventually we might see 100 matches per year, and that would be better. But the rate of folks that would need housing will still continue to rise. So I don't know if that delta will ever be closed. And then I just did the QR code here on the screen, and I typed in Bellingham and $600 per month, and there weren't any listings at that rate. In fact, the first one was $1,200 per month, and then $750, $965, and $900. So my question, I guess, is the realities of what people need to rent their space out for, and to make it pencil and to make it make sense. And I'm just wondering what considerations are provided to address that need, just given the realities of the market.
I'll start first by answering your second question, because I might have you repeat the first question that you had. But to answer your second question about the price and what's listed right now, yes, there is not anything lower at that 600 or below rate right now, because they've all been rented up. So what we've seen is anything that's priced 600 or lower tends to be rented rather quickly once it's been on the site. So we've had 4 successful matches, and all of those have been fairly reasonably priced. There was actually one that just was rented at $1,200, and that was for kind of a basement apartment, so full dwelling unit. So it really ranges depending on what each homeowner is able to offer, whether it's a small bedroom, a furnished bedroom, shared kitchen facilities versus private. So there is a pretty big range in cost. And to your other point about what it might cost for the cost-benefit analysis for homeowners, I think That's very accurate, and I do want to stress a lot of our materials we often say, please come talk to us, especially if you're a lower income homeowner and receiving benefits of any kind. We want to make sure that this extra income isn't going to disqualify you from any of those other benefits that you're getting. So city staff as well as Nesterly staff are here to support homeowners and trying to understand what that nexus is and how we can price that room correctly for them. And would you mind repeating your first question?
It was just related to the scalability of getting this to the point where it would make a really good dent in the vacancy rate issue that we face.
Yeah, I just want to stress this is not, this is only one of many available options. So we don't anticipate that this will take a major chunk out of the housing issue, but it's just one more solution that we haven't already been offering to date. We also know this is only going to benefit homeowners. We do have a requirement that the homeowner lives on site to be able to list their bedrooms for rent. Nesterly doesn't require that in other communities, but we felt that that was important for us to make sure that this is something that's going to benefit both the homeowner and the renter in our community. So we hope it'll just move the needle ever so slightly. Thanks.
I would like to add on to the second question too. One of the questions I asked at the beginning of this is, what does success look like? And those milestones, they don't look like huge numbers, I think is what you're raising. But we were looking at the success of other communities throughout the country and what that startup period is. And so that's where we got those benchmarks for the size community that we are. And also we do need to know if we're making, are we successful knowing, and what I said at the beginning, we were told, really, if we're going to do this, you can't do this for a year and go, oh, it didn't really work out, because it just really does take time to build the trust in the brand. And I think that's what we're asking for right now, is the community needs to hear about Nesterly from more than probably one source for them to start to go, oh, this is a thing. And so I think that's really our focus. And then let's say we get to 100 matches per year. 100 matches times 75,000, which is what we put into every housing unit that we help build, is $7.5 million. That's a tremendous amount of savings, I think, for our community, for an inventory that's already built in our community. So.
Thank you so much for this presentation and for those framing comments. I think this is a tremendous opportunity, and so let's all commit to being good partners to spread the word. My one comment is I think Joyce and Franceline are such a great story, and I think there's probably a lot of opportunities in our manufactured home communities where maybe folks recently lost a spouse and are just dealing with really high lot rents. And Rep. Timmons last year co-sponsored House Bill 1204, which would have given manufactured homeowners a right to participate in home sharing programs. And I don't know if that's going to be an issue in Bellingham, or if our park owners see the value in this just like we do. But if that comes up, I think council would be interested in hearing that. So, but targeted outreach to manufactured homeowners could be something we could think about. And thank you so much for this presentation. Any other comments? Councilmember Stone, Council President, sorry.
Yeah, one, just a big thank you. As you said, it's a creative, option and a way to really try and leverage the housing that's there. And just wanting to highlight one of the things that Taylor was saying, just that affordability piece and the ability to see benefits, on both sides. And that if people who, yes, own their home, but are struggling right now to make ends meet, being able to bridge that gap. Thinking about the example that was shared, just wondering the targeted outreach to places like the senior center, and thinking about local churches and schools, Amber Alert, and thinking about boards and commissions and boards. I don't know, when when Mayor Lund was talking about the values of this community and how it really seems like this would be an amazing match, it's thinking about the number of people who have asked questions about like, well, how do we help and sort of what's your role in the community about addressing this, need and the housing crisis that we're all facing. And so really those personal contacts, but the ability to, to show people the way, because as you mentioned, it's an existing asset that our community has, and just figuring out how to leverage that. So I'm cautiously optimistic and very excited that the city, took this on when you mentioned that there wasn't a partner who really had the bandwidth to take this on themselves. So just appreciation and hopes that there are additional ways we can brainstorm to market this citywide. So thank you.
And seeing no further comments, any closing remarks? Great. Well, thank you again. That's the end of our committee today. So back to you, Council President Stone.
Thank you very much. So we will wait just a moment to line up the next meeting, which will start at 2:50. Just a moment. So welcome back to Committee of the Whole. Just noting that all council members are present. And the only item before us this afternoon is old and new business. And I first just wanted to share the public safety alert that came through during our last committee, just making sure that members of the public who may be watching the meeting are aware that Whatcom County is experiencing a disruption to 911 services. So at this time, if you are unable to reach help when dialing 911, hang up and dial 360-676-6911 to reach the 911 dispatch center directly. So hopefully that will be a very brief disruption and not too impactful, but making sure people know how to reach those services. For old and new business, any other council members have items? Okay. I had one item. So as you may know, as part of our legislative lobby work, we have council members that are then selected by the full council to serve in that capacity. Looking at the legislative lobbying guide that Iris, not our legislative analyst, had put together, we were thinking about the timing of those appointments, and so it doesn't come up during the reorganization meeting, right, in January, but better aligns with the legislative cycle. And so just wanting to bring forward for the council consideration of just some tweaks to that language, basically mentioning that those appointments then would take place during the interim between the legislative sessions to allow council members, right, to participate in preparation for the upcoming session. So Iris was going to move forward with that change. Previously, it had mentioned that it would be, I think, in the fall, and we were hoping that change could happen sooner, just to make sure that those individuals are on the ready. So that work would not be starting immediately, but I was hoping to either give consideration if there are members of the council who know that they want to serve in that capacity now, coming up with 3 names. And if people are not ready to throw their name in the hat yet, it can come forward at the next meeting, but wanting to give you a heads up and just mentioning that there's no work to be taken on immediately. That work's not starting, but to have those names on the ready so that, when that work begins, we know who the point people are, and or if there's some emerging or developing issue that happens in the interim, we know who those point people are in advance. So, Councilmember Lillquist.
Well, I'm certainly interested again, but I did serve last year, so I think it should be some consideration. If there's room, I'd like to serve. If there's 3 new people, maybe not.
Councilmember Hamel.
I'd serve as well. I did serve 2 cycles ago.
Are there other? I know there's a balance. I mean, it can be helpful to have some consistency, but it's also helpful to have some new voices as well. But there are 3 spots. Councilmember Cotton, did you?
Interested if it was still Fridays at lunchtime. So it's more of a scheduling question.
Okay. I know. And I don't believe there is a set schedule yet for, that regular work with the lobby team and the lobbyists down in Olympia once that work starts. But Director Keller, do you have additional information?
Janice Keller, Deputy City Administrator. There's a high likelihood that the work together will be on Fridays, so.
Thank you, Deputy Keller. Councilmember Williams?
Yeah, I'd like to be considered for the next cycle and see how that works. It takes me back to the days when I actually had to go down and do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Councilmember Cotton?
Maybe this is an opportunity for us to do a ranked choice vote.
For all 7 of us.
I know, throw the names in. Okay. Well, at this time, are there any other council members who want to be considered? It falls, again, the legislative cycle then also spans the years. So our appointments for leadership on the council also fluctuates and changes during that time. So I've seen in the past advantages of having president of the council, being a part of that team, and when you're thinking about either speaking or providing testimony and or signing off on letters, but that information could also come back to the full council. So, okay. Thinking of the time and schedule today, does anyone want to give that further consideration and try and finalize that today, or for us to bring it back at the next meeting? We go either way. Why don't we do it? Okay, sounds good. Okay, so do notice any concerns with just a brief update change to the guidelines? Just recognizing that this change would then happen annually in the summer between the 2 sessions. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, we'll bring that back at the next meeting. One other item for tonight. Anything else for old and new? If not, we have multiple executive session items, so kind of a lengthy executive session. First, there was one item that was removed. So the first item, which was litigation, Oldham versus City of Bellingham et al. With Phillips for approximately 15 minutes. That item was removed on June 9th. We still have 4 items for consideration this afternoon. So the first is a potential property acquisition comprehensive update. This will be with Perelskin for approximately 30 minutes. Potential litigation with Chaplin and Cram for approximately 10 minutes. Also potential litigation with Cram for approximately 10 minutes. And then an additional potential litigation item with Chaplin for approximately 10 minutes, which was added on June 9th. So in total, we are looking at just over an hour. And if we take about a 5-minute break to get us into that executive session, I will plan to come back by 4:15. Okay, there's nothing further. We will adjourn and reconvene this evening at 7 o'clock. Thank you all very much and have a good afternoon.